"Don't open it, Harold. Can't you see?" My wife's voice trembled, not with anger, but with something colder, fear. The small brown box sat on the kitchen table, wrapped in my daughter Emily's neat handwriting. "Happy Father's Day," it read in blue ink, the kind she always used in school, but the weight of it in my hands felt wrong, heavy, but not in ounces, in meaning. I looked at my wife. She didn't blink. "What do you think it is?" I asked, though my voice sounded distant, almost someone else's. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's not a gift, Harold. It's a message, and if you open it now, you'll see exactly what she thinks of you." The ticking of the kitchen clock filled the silence between us, and in that moment, I knew Emily had crossed a line she could never uncross, and I was going to make sure she'd regret it. When Emily was born, I was already 42. Some people called me an older dad, but I never minded. If anything, I thought it gave me an edge, more patience, more perspective. I had already been through the noise and rush of chasing promotions and proving myself. By then, my life was about building a home that felt steady, safe, a place where my child could grow without worry. The first time I held her, the world outside the hospital window seemed irrelevant. She had a tuft of dark hair and a pair of alert brown eyes that seemed to be studying me, as if she was deciding if I was worthy. I remember leaning close and whispering, "I'll spend the rest of my life proving I am." And I did. I worked 12-hour shifts at the plant, then stayed up late rocking her through colic nights so my wife could sleep. I missed bowling league nights with friends, traded fishing trips for tea parties in the living room. I learned how to braid hair, though my first attempts left her looking like she'd been in a small tornado. She'd laugh, tug the braid loose, and say, "Try again, Daddy." And I would. Emily grew fast, too fast. From the girl who ran into my arms when I came home, to the teenager who barely looked up from her phone when I walked in. I told myself it was just part of growing up. I remembered being that age, how the world seemed to revolve around friends, music, and the next big thing. Still, I tried to stay present. When she was in high school, she got into a summer program for aspiring artists. It wasn't cheap: tuition, supplies, housing for 6 weeks in another state. My wife and I had been saving for years, but not quite enough. So I took on weekend shifts, sold my old motorcycle, and even dipped into my modest retirement savings to cover the rest. The look on her face when I handed her the acceptance packet made it worth it. She hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. "You're the best dad," she whispered. College came, and with it, bigger expenses. I co-signed her student loans, paid for her books, and sent grocery money every month. Sometimes I'd sneak an extra $50 into her account with the note, "For something just for you. No studying allowed." She'd text back with a row of heart emojis. I lived for those. But it wasn't just money I gave. It was my time, my energy, my belief in her. I was there when her high school boyfriend broke her heart, sitting on the porch swing with her until sunrise. I drove through a blizzard to pick her up from a failed camping trip. I even learned how to use Instagram just so I could like her art posts and leave encouraging comments. My wife used to joke that Emily had me wrapped around her little finger. She wasn't wrong. I didn't mind being wrapped up in my daughter's life. It was what fatherhood meant to me. Still, in quiet moments, I noticed little changes. Calls that came less often, visits that ended earlier, the way she sometimes spoke to me as if I were a child who didn't quite understand the modern world. But I brushed it aside. She's busy. She's growing. I told myself this was just what independence looked like. Years passed. She graduated, got a job in the city, and began living a life that didn't seem to have much space for me. And yet, whenever she needed help, money for a deposit, advice on a tricky boss, someone to fix her leaky faucet, she called, and I always showed up. One Thanksgiving, she arrived late, sweeping into the house with the scent of expensive perfume and city air. She hugged her mother first, then me, though her arms barely closed around my shoulders. I brushed it off, told myself I was imagining the coolness in her tone. I didn't realize then how far the ground beneath us had already shifted. How the daughter I thought I knew, the one I'd carried, protected, and championed, was beginning to see me not as a father, but as something else entirely. A resource. And resources in her world weren't treasured. They were used. By the time the Father's Day box arrived, our relationship was already something different. Something strained, brittle. I just didn't know yet how much it was about to break. It didn't happen all at once. Greed rarely kicks the door in. It seeps in, drip by drip, until you barely notice you're standing in a flood. The first hint came 2 years after Emily started her job. We were at a Sunday dinner. Her mother had made roast chicken and mashed potatoes, the kind Emily always loved as a kid. Halfway through the meal, she leaned back in her chair, wine glass in hand, and said casually, "You know, Dad, that house of yours is way too big for you and Mom now. You should think about selling it. Move into something smaller. You'd make a fortune." I chuckled at the time, assuming she was just making conversation. "This is the house we raised you in," I said. "Your mother's roses are in that yard." Not ready to give that up. She smirked, just a little. "Well, just think about it. You could help me with a down payment in the city." It was a joke, I told myself. Young people talk like that. But something in her tone, light, practiced, almost testing, stuck with me. Then there was the Christmas when she gave me a smart watch. "So you can keep up with the times," she'd said with a grin. I appreciated the thought, but the way she insisted on setting it up for me herself was strange. She linked it to my phone, my email, my bank notifications to make it easier. A month later, she called asking about a specific withdrawal I'd made, something I hadn't told her about. I asked how she knew. She laughed it off. "Dad, you just forget who you tell things to sometimes." I let it slide, but a small knot had begun to form in my chest. The next sign was subtle but sharper. She invited us to her new apartment for dinner, a sleek, modern place with a view of the skyline. Over dessert, she said, "You know, Dad, when you retire, you could always transfer some of your investments to me. It would lower your tax burden. I read about it online." I looked at her across the table, her face lit by the city lights. She was so self-assured, so certain she knew what was best for me. But in her suggestion, I heard something else, a belief that what was mine was, eventually, hers. My wife noticed it too. On the drive home, she was quiet for a while before saying, "She's been different lately, more interested in numbers than in you." I brushed it off again, saying, "She's just thinking about the future. But the thing about the future is, people start planning for it in ways you don't expect." It wasn't just the money talk. It was the dismissiveness, the way she'd roll her eyes if I didn't know some new app or reference, the way she'd say things like, "Well, when I take over one day," as if my life's work was a business she was waiting to inherit. One spring afternoon, she came over while I was in the garage. I'd been sorting through old tools, oil cans, and boxes from decades past. She stepped inside, wrinkling her nose. "Why do you still have all this junk?" "You could sell most of it, or donate it. You don't need it anymore." I told her these weren't just tools. They were part of my history, my father's old hammer, the set of wrenches I bought when we first moved into the house, her little red wagon still in the corner. She laughed. "Dad, it's just stuff. You can't take it with you." That was the first time I truly heard the edge in her voice. Not playful, not teasing, cold practicality, as if my worth was measured in resale value. Then came the slip. One night, she called me by accident. I picked up, but she must not have realized the line was open. I heard her voice in the background, talking to someone, maybe a friend, maybe more than a friend. "Yeah, he's sitting on way more than he needs. The house alone could set me up for years. He just has to, get to that stage where he's ready to let go." My stomach dropped. I hung up before she realized I'd heard. From that night on, I started noticing every little comment, every suggestion, every look she gave the house when she walked through it. I didn't say anything, not yet, but something inside me began to shift. Because I've learned over a lifetime that when people start circling, it's not out of love. It's because they think you're slowing down. They think you're prey. And I didn't know it then, but that Father's Day box would prove she no longer saw me as her father at all, just the final obstacle between her and what she thought she deserved. The box sat in the middle of the kitchen table, like it owned the room. Not large, maybe the size of a shoebox, but heavier than it looked. Brown paper wrapping, a neat white label in Emily's handwriting. "To Dad, Happy Father's Day." My wife stood by the sink, hands buried in a dish towel she wasn't using to dry anything, just twisting it, watching me. "You're not going to like it," she said quietly. Her tone bothered me more than the words. It wasn't pity. It wasn't warning. It was something colder, like she already knew whatever was inside had been decided long before this day. I slit the paper with my pocket knife. The sound of tearing cardboard echoed too loudly in the quiet kitchen. The smell hit first. Not flowers, not baked goods, not the cedar of a new tie rack. Paper, cheap printer paper, thick with ink. Inside was a single stack of documents neatly clipped. On top, in bold black letters. I stared at it, blinked, looked again. What is this? My voice cracked on the last word. My wife came closer, but didn't touch the papers. Read the second page. I flipped it over. There, in clean legal formatting, was a statement declaring that my daughter, Emily, would have full control over my medical decisions and finances in the event of diminished capacity. My eyes caught on the signature line. It already had her name printed neatly, and next to my signature line was my name scrawled in ink. My handwriting, except I'd never signed it. I felt my breath shorten. My ears rang. I held the paper up. What the hell is this? The front door opened just then, and Emily walked in like she owned the place. Sunglasses pushed up on her head, shopping bag in hand. "Hey, happy Father's Day," she said brightly, as if we were about to share cake and coffee. I just held the stack of papers in the air. Her smile faltered. "Oh, you opened it already. What is this?" My voice was low, steady. She dropped her bag on the counter and stepped toward me, palms up in that calm down gesture she'd started using on me lately. "It's just paperwork. In case something happens to you, you're not getting any younger, Dad, and this way things won't be complicated. You forged my signature." Her jaw tightened. "It's not forgery if it's for your own good." The room went very still. Even the clock seemed to pause between ticks. "For my own good," I repeated slowly. "Or for your convenience." She sighed, actually sighed, like I was being dramatic. "You don't understand how hard it is to deal with estates, probate, all that. This way, I can make decisions quickly, without courts or delays. If something happens, I can sell the house, pay bills, whatever needs to be done." "Sell the house? Well, yeah. You and Mom don't need this place if you're in a facility or..." She trailed off, but her eyes flicked to my wife's, as if she expected backup. She didn't get it. My wife's face was pale, lips pressed thin. I set the papers down carefully, as if they were something poisonous. "And what if I told you I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions?" Emily shrugged. "You are now? But that could change any time. You've had some forgetful moments lately." "That was one grocery list," I snapped. She flinched, then recovered. "Look, I was just trying to make sure everything's handled. If you want, we can go to the bank and sign a fresh copy so it's all official." "No." My voice was so quiet it surprised me. "This is not going to happen." Her eyes hardened. "Dad, you're overreacting. I'm the only one who can take care of this. Who else are you going to trust?" I looked at her, really looked, and saw not my little girl, but someone else entirely. Someone who saw me not as her father, but as a set of keys she was impatient to take. "I used to think I could trust you with anything," I said. "Now, I'm not sure I can trust you with the salt shaker." She rolled her eyes. "You're being ridiculous." I slid the stack of papers back into the box and pushed it toward her. "Take it. Get it out of my house." Emily hesitated, then picked it up. "Fine. But don't come crying to me when you need help, and it's too late." She walked out, heels clicking on the hardwood like a gavel slamming shut. The door closed behind her with a final, heavy thud. I sat there for a long time, staring at the space where the box had been. My wife put a hand on my shoulder. "She's been planning this for a while," she said softly. "I know," I said, and I did. All the little comments, the just-in-case suggestions, the casual way she'd talk about the house. It had all been leading here. But what she didn't know, what she'd never even considered, was that I wasn't as helpless as she thought. She believed she was moving the first piece on the board. She had no idea I'd been playing the game long before she learned the rules. And that's when I decided, if she wanted to play power games over my life, I'd show her just how dangerous it was to underestimate me. I didn't react the way Emily expected. That's the first rule in any game where people are trying to take something from you. Don't play the role they've already written for you. She wanted me angry, defensive, maybe even guilty. She wanted me to rush into arguments I couldn't win, saying things she could later twist into, "Dad's losing it." So, I gave her nothing. In the weeks after Father's Day, I went about life as usual. I still called her on Sundays, still asked about her work, still told her mom's roast chicken was waiting if she wanted to visit. On the surface, nothing had changed, but under that surface I was taking stock. I pulled my will out of the safe, read every word. I'd written it years ago, back when I trusted her implicitly. She was listed as sole executor, the house, the accounts, even the little things, my tools, my father's watch, were all going to her. I thought about that forged signature, the casual way she'd talked about selling the house before I was even gone. And I realized something. Emily believed she was inevitable, that no matter what she did, I'd never cut her out. That belief was going to be my greatest weapon. I called my attorney, an old friend, someone I'd known since before Emily was born. We met in his office one quiet Tuesday morning. I told him everything, the comments, the forged paperwork, the box. He listened without interrupting, his pen still in his hand but unmoving. When I finished, he leaned back. "Harold, this isn't just bad behavior. It's attempted fraud. We could press charges." "No," I said immediately. "If I go after her in court, the family will split down the middle. She'll play the victim, and I'll be the bitter old man who can't let go. No, this has to be quieter than that. Cleaner." He smiled faintly. "Then we'll make it so she never sees it coming." We rewrote my will, not just the big things, the details. I split assets into separate trusts, each with clear conditions. The house would go to a local veterans charity upon my passing. My investment accounts would be divided between my wife and 2 community scholarships. Emily would still get something, a modest sum, but nowhere near the fortune she assumed was waiting. But I didn't stop there. I also set up a living trust for the house, with a transfer on death clause that bypassed probate entirely. That meant no one, not even my daughter, could stall or interfere with its transfer after I was gone. And because she'd already proven she was willing to forge documents, I added one last safeguard, a letter to be delivered to my attorney if any attempt was made to access my finances without my consent. That letter included a notarized statement from me about the Father's Day incident, along with a copy of the forged document. It wasn't a lawsuit, but it was a loaded weapon if I ever needed it. While the legal side was handled, I began working on the personal side. I didn't want her to know I was changing things, yet. Instead, I played the long game, letting her believe she was still in control of the narrative. When she brought up future plans in conversation, I nodded along. When she hinted about how smart it would be to move into assisted living someday, I smiled and changed the subject. Every agreeable nod was another thread in the web I was spinning, keeping her comfortable, overconfident. My wife was in on it from the start. We moved some accounts into her name exclusively, closed others entirely. I even took a few valuables, a set of rare coins, my grandfather's rifle, and quietly gifted them to friends and extended family I trusted. All documented, all legal. It wasn't about the money. It was about making sure Emily understood that love is not a given, trust is not a given, and that when you gamble it all for greed, you lose more than you think. One night, about 3 months after Father's Day, I sat on the porch with my wife, watching the sun sink behind the maple trees. She asked, "Do you think she'll ever realize what she's done?" I took a sip of my coffee. Eventually. But by the time she does, the lesson will be permanent. Because revenge, in my experience, isn't about hurting someone. It's about making them live with the weight of knowing they can't undo what they've lost. The stage was set. All I needed now was the right moment to let her discover the truth, and watch her face when she realized she'd played herself out of everything. The thing about good revenge is it doesn't feel like revenge at all, at least not to the person dishing it out. To me, it felt like housekeeping, cleaning up the mess my daughter had made of her own morals. It began in small, invisible steps. First, I played along with her script. I accepted her help with things I didn't need help with, like setting up online bill pay or checking in on my accounts. But every time she tried to take an inch, I was already 3 steps ahead. If she asked for account numbers, I gave her the ones I'd already emptied into protected trusts. If she offered to streamline my investments, I told her I'd think about it, and then quietly shifted them somewhere she couldn't touch. She thought she was gathering control. In reality, she was shadowboxing. 3 months after the Father's Day incident, she invited herself over for dinner. She walked in with that breezy entitlement she'd perfected, hugging her mother first, kissing me on the cheek like nothing had happened. Over dessert, she casually mentioned, "So, I talked to a friend who works in real estate. He said, with the market right now, you could get top dollar for this house. I mean, you could even give me the deed now, for tax purposes. Win-win." I smiled into my coffee cup. "Interesting," I said. "Let's talk about it soon." She beamed, thinking she'd won a round. I didn't want to confront her outright. That would only give her time to maneuver, to spin the story. What I needed was a moment where her greed would overplay itself, something she couldn't walk back. The opportunity came in late September. My wife and I hosted a small dinner, just close family and a couple of longtime friends. I knew Emily wouldn't miss it. She hated being left out of anything that might involve a decision about the future of the house. Halfway through the evening, I brought up a story about a neighbor who had passed away. "His kids fought for months over his property," I said casually, buttering a roll. "The court finally sold it and split the money evenly." "Shame, really?" Emily leaned forward. "That's why I've been telling you. You should just transfer things now, so it's smooth later." One of my old friends, a retired accountant, chuckled. "I don't think Harold needs to worry. He's probably got it all in a living trust by now. Ironclad." I caught Emily's expression. For the briefest moment, her eyes widened. Then she masked it with a laugh. But I'd seen it, the flicker of panic. Bingo. The next week, I called her. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said, about making things smoother. Why don't you come by Saturday? We'll go over some paperwork." She arrived dressed like she was heading to a business meeting, sleek blazer, hair pulled back, a pen already in her hand. We sat at the kitchen table, just the two of us. I slid a thick folder toward her. "Everything you need to know is in here," I said. She opened it eagerly, only to find copies of my new will, the trust documents, and the scholarship charters. She scanned the pages, her face draining of color, as she realized she wasn't the executor anymore. The house was no longer hers to claim. The investments were locked away. Her name appeared only once, next to a sum that wouldn't even buy a modest car in her city. She looked up. This can't be right." "It's exactly right," I said evenly. "Everything is legal, notarized, and filed." "You're cutting me out?" "No," I said. "You cut yourself out. I just made it official." Her voice rose. "This is because of that stupid box, isn't it?" "You're overreacting." I held up a hand. "Careful, Emily. Because if we want to talk about that box, we'll also have to talk about the forgery inside it." Her mouth opened, then closed. "That document," I continued, "and the statement I wrote about it are in my lawyer's safe, along with a recording of this conversation, which started the moment you walked through the door." I tapped my phone, sitting face up on the table. She glanced at it, realizing too late. "If anything ever happens to me under suspicious circumstances," I said, "those go straight to the police. And you'll spend more time explaining yourself to them than you've ever spent with me in the last 5 years. She swallowed hard. "You wouldn't try me." I didn't kick her out immediately. That would have been too easy. Instead, I let her sit there, stewing, while I poured us both coffee. I talked about the weather, the maple trees turning red, the repairs I'd been doing on the shed. Let her feel the weight of the silence between us. Finally, I said, "You know, Emily, I always planned for you to have this house. I thought it would be where you'd bring your kids someday, where you'd tell them about the time you painted your room purple without asking." Her eyes softened for half a second, but I didn't let it sway me. "But when you start treating people like they're already gone, you lose the right to inherit what they built." She set her coffee down with a sharp clink. "I guess there's nothing left to say then." "No," I said. "There's one thing. You're still welcome here, for dinner, for holidays. If you can come as my daughter, not as my heir, that's your choice." She stood, grabbed her bag, and left without another word. I didn't tell the rest of the family directly. I knew how news travels, faster and with sharper edges when it's whispered. Within a month, I started getting calls from cousins and old friends, each one opening with some version of, "I heard you made changes to your will. I never confirmed or denied, just said, I made sure everything's fair. It didn't take long for Emily to feel the shift. Invitations dried up. Friends she thought were allies stopped answering her texts. She wasn't cut off completely, but she was no longer the golden child with the guaranteed future. The last time we spoke, she came by unannounced. No blazer this time, no pen in hand. She stood on the porch, hands in her coat pockets, looking smaller somehow. I brought you something, she said, holding out a wrapped box. I took it, felt the lightness of it, something simple. Inside was a framed photo of us from her high school graduation. I thought you'd like it, she murmured. I studied her face. Couldn't tell if it was guilt or just the realization that the game she'd been playing was over. Maybe both. Thank you, I said, and meant it. Because the real victory wasn't that she lost the house or the money. It was that she now understood exactly why. And that knowledge was going to sit with her a lot longer than any inheritance ever would. The board was clear. The game was over. And the one lesson she'd never forget was this. If you try to outplay someone who's been quietly winning their whole life, you'll end up handing them the checkmate yourself. Revenge doesn't always arrive like a thunderclap. Sometimes it seeps in quietly, a slow erosion of the very ground someone thought was solid beneath their feet. In the months after our kitchen table reckoning, Emily's life began to shift. Not all at once, just enough that I could see the pattern forming. The first crack came in December. She called, sounding flustered, asking if I could spot her for rent. Apparently, a big client at her marketing firm had pulled their account, and her hours had been cut. I told her I was sorry to hear that, but that things were tight for me too. It was the first time I'd ever said no to her financially. There was a long pause before she muttered, "Right, of course," and hung up. A few weeks later, my wife mentioned seeing Emily's apartment listed online, at a reduced rate. She'd moved into a smaller place, one of those modern efficiency units where the bed folds into the wall. Socially, the shift was just as sharp. At family gatherings, the air around her was different. Cousins who used to hang on her every word now seemed guarded. My sister, who had always been one of Emily's biggest cheerleaders, pulled me aside one night and said, "She told me you cut her out of the will." I told her, "Well, maybe you should ask yourself why." She didn't like that. Then came the real blow. One evening in March, she showed up on my doorstep unannounced. No makeup, hair pulled back into a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes. She sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd once tried to strong-arm me into signing my life away, and said, "I think I made a mistake." I didn't answer. I just waited. I thought... She stopped, exhaled. I thought I was being smart, planning ahead. But now, no one trusts me. At work, people keep things from me. In the family, everyone thinks I'm... She trailed off, unable to say it. "Thinks you're what?" I asked. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked it back. "Selfish." I could have told her that was the word long before anyone else noticed, but I didn't. I just sipped my coffee. I want things to be like they were, she said softly. The truth was, they never could be. Trust, once broken like that, doesn't grow back on its own. It has to be rebuilt, brick by brick, and some people never learn how. Over the next year, I watched her navigate a reality she'd never prepared for. She sold her car, took on a roommate half her age, and posted far fewer glamorous outings on social media. There was no sudden collapse, no dramatic downfall, just a slow, steady shrinking of her world. The sweetest part? I didn't have to lift another finger. The damage had been done the moment she'd shown her hand, and the rest was just gravity pulling her down. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at the house when she visited, her eyes moving over the porch, the garden, the maple trees out front. I could almost see the thoughts running through her mind, that this place should have been hers, that it could have been, if she just waited, just loved without scheming. But greed has no patience, and patience was exactly what I'd used to beat her. The final chapter wasn't about her losing the house. It was about her realizing she'd lost me. And for someone who thought they could control everything, that's the kind of loss you can never plan your way out of. It's strange how quiet the house feels these days. Not empty, never empty, but quieter. The kind of quiet that comes when the storms have passed and the air finally settles. Emily still visits, though not often. When she does, we talk about safe things, the weather, a new recipe my wife's trying, the neighbor's dog that keeps digging under the fence. There's a civility there, even a kind of warmth, but it's thinner now. Not because I've closed my heart to her, but because I've learned to protect it. Once, after dinner, she lingered by the front door. Her hand brushed the frame, and she said softly, "This place really is beautiful, Dad." I nodded. It is. And it always will be, even after we're gone. I didn't need to explain further. She knew exactly what I meant. The house, the accounts, the heirlooms, they were never just things. They were the record of a life lived, of sacrifices made, of trust built brick by brick over decades. And those things, when given, are gifts, not obligations. The moment someone starts treating them like a guarantee, the meaning behind them is already gone. I've had time to think about that Father's Day box, about how, in her mind, it was probably just planning ahead. Maybe she thought she was protecting herself from the messiness of the future, but there's a fine line between planning for someone and planning over them, between caring for their well-being and positioning yourself for their absence. That's the thing about greed. It dresses itself up in logic, in responsibility, even in love. But no matter how neatly you wrap it, it still smells the same when you tear the paper off. People ask me sometimes if I regret cutting her out of most of the estate. I tell them the truth, no, because it wasn't punishment, it was clarity. If she wanted the reward, she needed to value the relationship first. I don't hate my daughter, I never will. But love without boundaries isn't love, it's surrender. And I've learned that when you're old enough, wise enough, and calm enough, you can say no without raising your voice, without throwing a single stone, and still shake the walls around someone who underestimated you. Some nights, I sit on the porch with my coffee, watching the sun dip behind the maple trees, the same way I did when she was little. I think about how she used to run up those steps, breathless from playing, and I remember the promise I made when she was born, that I'd spend my life proving I was worthy of being her father. I kept that promise. She's the one who broke hers, and if there's one lesson I hope she carries long after I'm gone, it's this. Family isn't something you inherit, it's something you earn every single day.